Hello friends and welcome to my channel if you're new, or welcome back if you are back. If you are new, hi, my name's Rabbit and my pronouns are they, them. Either way, thank you so much for clicking on this video today. So today's video I'm very excited about. Probably like a year or maybe 2 years ago, I did this like jewelry DIY ideas video, and someone had commented recently being like, hey, can you do a part 2? I was like, yes, I should definitely do that. I've been having some ideas for different jewelry things that I've been wanting to do for a while. So in this video, I'm just gonna do a couple little tutorials together. It's a lot of kind of like blood spatter themed stuff, but I think it's a lot of fun and it's not all blood inspired, so feel free to skip around. There will be timestamps for everything. I think there's a lot of versatility in these projects. It's mostly chokers, but you could make them into bracelets, anklets, use the techniques to modify clothing like turtlenecks or collars or shirts. Really, the world is your oyster. This is just kind of supposed to be a jumping off point, and I hope it can provide some inspiration. So without further ado, let's get into the first project. Okay, so we're starting out with a sort of blood drip choker kind of idea. So first you're going to want to measure your neck and cut out a piece of felt or fleece or denim or some kind of sturdy-ish fabric that you're going to want to use as your base to embroider on. And if you want to be really precise, you can get a really exact blood drip pattern that you want to do and trace it on first, but I'm just kind of winging it and going with some fabric scissors and cutting out a general drippy type of shape that is about as long as my neck. We're going to want to add the ribbons to fasten it, pinning some red ribbon to both ends of it and using my sewing machine to stitch it on real tight. Now is for the fun yet slightly tedious part. I have all sorts of little red thrifted beads, and with a needle and red thread, just outlining the shape of the choker with them. I'm going with like probably 4 or 5 beads at a time and then just sewing them on. I'd recommend to tie off your sewing thread every couple of like sections. That way if it breaks at any point, all of your beads aren't going to come out at once and you'll just have to repair a small portion of it instead of like half of the necklace. I've never taken any like beading classes, and I'm sure there's like proper techniques you could use and learn and like Google if you're more interested in learning that, but I'm really just going and winging it and just doing like a couple of little lines of beads at a time. And I also find that when you're doing a string of beads, if they're loose, like if they're not really hugging the fabric like you want them to, you can add some little stitches over top of them to kind of hold them all in place. In terms of choosing beads, I would recommend to not pick something too heavy, like glass beads. Try to use really limited amounts of them if you're using those. You're going to want to stick with more like lightweight stuff and just like smaller things in general. And the smaller the beads, the more control you have over like the shape of them and the more easily you're able to like follow the lines of the drips. So for this project, I decided to kind of do the outline first, so I get kind of a clear edge around all of the blood drip, and then later I will fill in the rest of it. But if after doing just the outline of it, you're like, this is enough, I am done, I am bored, and I just want it to be like this, then you can totally just leave it there. I think it looks a-okay and just fine, even if it's just a little bit less. If you find that any parts of the fabric are sticking out from the beaded border, feel free to really carefully trim them with some scissors just to neaten up the edges. That's what I did. I think I did that off camera, but yes, absolutely an option. So you can see that the outline is now complete and it's time to fill in the sections. This part was a lot more fun and less stressful, so I decided to do this in kind of lines, straight lines just up and down of the blood drips, and again occasionally looping the needle and thread through the beads to kind of hold them in place. But this was honestly really satisfying. I love fiddly little tasks like this that are just like really repetitive and detail intensive. So if that sounds like a fun time to you, I think that this would be a really, really fun project. I think it looks great on bare skin as well as over like roughly high neck choker things. So, you know, pick your poison with that. Now that it's all filled in, it's time to just add some big glass beads as blood drippies. I just really wanted to use these up because they were in my bead stash and I was like, these seem wonderful. So I'm just going ahead and at the ends of each drip, adding one or a couple of little glass beads, just tying them on really simply. There was nothing really to this, just making sure that they were really, really secure. You can do this with just one big chunk of bead, and I think that looks really great. Or you can use a bunch of little beads in a row if you don't have big beads, or if you don't like the look of that. I think that also looks really cool and provides like a nice level of movement to this. I think it's fun to play around with the shape, so some of them are more round, some of them are like teardrop. Like I mentioned, these are all just from thrift store necklaces and thrift store bags of beads. I will say this kind of thing is heavier than a non-beaded choker, so if you don't like heavy things on your neck, this might not be a great project for you. But maybe making something similar but dipping the fabric in red glitter or using red sequins could be a good alternative. So yeah, basically just tying on all of the little ends of the beads. There wasn't really much to explain with this one. It's more just the fact that it's fiddly and long and time intensive, but the technique wasn't really like too difficult to teach myself. It was just kind of stitching on some beads. And I would recommend using like red fabric and thread, so if you do have gaps between things, it's not so obvious. But yeah, really happy with the final result. Let me show you what it looks like all done. So this is how the blood choker turned out. Okay, if I have to be completely honest, this was supposed to be kind of for a beef look from Phantom of the Paradise. It's one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, and I've been wanting to do a horror musical lookbook either for Halloween or some point in the future, so I wanted to do this for beef, but it looks way more glamorous than I intended. Regardless, I think it's super freaking cool, and I'm excited to incorporate it into a lot of different looks, especially more like fancy, more vampy ones. It feels really heavy, which to me I really love, because there's something about heavy pressure and texture of clothing that to me is like very relaxing and grounding. But if you don't like that, obviously this might not be a great idea. I think it's so freaking cool. I think it'll make a great layering piece. The idea of this with just like a black gown and like dyed black hair and like having this be the only pop of color, oh my gosh, yeah. I'm really excited about how this turned out, and looking forward to using it in more projects. Then I wanted to make another blood drip choker, but perhaps a bit of a simpler one. So with this one I was going with white for a very like Lucy Westenra kind of vibe. So I'm taking some white satin ribbon and just burning the ends of it so it's nice and sealed. And I wanted like a nice fancy lacy choker that I maybe could layer over a jabot or something. So I'm taking some white lace and measuring enough of it that I can sew it to the ribbon and have it poking out of both sides. To make it nice and neat looking, I decided to sandwich the lace between two pieces of ribbon so you wouldn't see the edges of it on either side. Also, I am so sorry for the exposure of my camera. Pinning it together so that there's lace on the top and the bottom, and then adding a ribbon to the other side. And in retrospect, I wish I only used a piece of lace on the bottom, because the top and the bottom makes it look kind of like a maid collar, which if you're into that kind of thing, I think that's a great idea. Then I'm adding the straps so I can tie it around my neck. I'm taking just some white ribbon and sandwiching it underneath the thicker ribbon and pinning it in place, so when I sew everything together, they will also get sewn and secured. And now I'm taking my sewing machine and just doing a nice zigzag stitch all along everything, so all of the lace and layers of ribbon are all nice and sandwiched together. And if you used a thicker ribbon for this, I think this really reminds me of like a Lolita headband. So if you're into making like more headwear kind of things, you can also kind of modify these projects to make them into a headband. If you don't like chokers, you could make this into a bracelet instead. Just make it long enough for your wrist instead of your neck. These are all really customizable. Just do what is of interest to you. Next, I'm trying it on my neck and putting 2 pins where a vampire bite could be. And I'm using some red thread and more of those little red beads to make those little blood drips. I feel like this was a very big fashion moment where people were embroidering a lot of beaded red and white together for very like vampire, horror, whatever looks. And it was just such a good fashion moment, and I like to recreate it. So if perhaps the last choker was a bit too time intensive and didn't seem appealing to do, maybe something like this where it's just 2 lines of the red beads is a bit quicker and easier and more like beginner friendly. Taking my needle and thread and stitching on 2 little lines of beads. Tie it really tight at the bottom. I like to feed
the needle and thread through the last bead so it's extra secure to tie it off. And you could be done here, but I wanted to add just a tiny bit of extra pizzazz, so I'm adding this little silver cross charm again for this very like vampire Lucy Westenra innocence corrupted sort of moment. So let's see how it looks like on.
This is how this one ended up turning out. I've been really considering chopping off the top or like tucking it in, probably just chopping it off, but regardless I think it's like a good base. And yeah, like I said, you could totally do like a little Lolita style headband with something like this. I know some people that like make chokers that can be worn as chokers or headbands, or maybe if you like wrap them around enough times they can be little wrist cuffs or whatever. So even if you don't make multiple different pieces, just experiment with different ways of wearing them if you want to, because yeah, these things are just, it's just a long piece of fabric essentially, which means it can be tied around in many versatile ways. I feel like it would make a great leg garter, hair ribbon potentially. Truly the world is your oyster. And yeah, I really like this kind of white on red look. I think it just like helps the blood red pop a lot more, though I'm not really comfortable with wearing very much white in most of my clothes. I think just starting to incorporate little accessories like this will be good, and I think it'll just be a fun piece to have in the closet for the more kind of like vintage vampire damsel in distress that's been bitten kind of vibe. So I'm excited about that.
Okay, now we're going a bit more into Hollywood glamour, super fancy territory. So I have this thrifted pearl necklace that I got a while ago, and it has some chains on it. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove those. It also has some paint on it from when I did a blood pearl thing, but it wasn't enough, so now is the time to really upgrade it to its full blood pearl glory. So first of all, this necklace was a little bit long, so in order to shorten it, I'm just opening up those links and removing a couple of the pearls from each strand so it's more of a choker length. And since I have all these leftover pearls now, I can restring them together to fill in some of the gaps where I took out the chain details of the necklace. Obviously this part wouldn't be necessary to every necklace, but if you do find one that's long that you want to turn into a choker, just cut and retie or open the clasps and pinch them back together. Whatever you gotta do to make the necklace as long as you like, you can do it. And this necklace already had a little bit of red paint to be fake blood on it, but not nearly enough. So I'm taking a couple of dark red paints and just really messily splatting on some red. This was a very popular thing I think like a year or two ago, maybe even longer than that, but I feel like I was seeing these really fancy bloody pearl necklaces and I've been wanting to make one forever, so we're finally getting to it, even if it's like 4 years later. Yeah, just make sure everything's dry between doing things and feel free to get quite messy. Now it's time for the fun part. Okay, I experimented with a couple of different materials and I found that wire was the best for them. I also tried some string, it was way too tangly, and some Fisher wire, like clear wire, but it didn't hold knots well enough. So with this, I'm just gonna feed some glass red beads into the wire and tie it off so they kind of stay in one spot. And I would recommend doing kind of the beads spaced out a little bit if you want more of like the spatter look. If you want like the full drips, you can put them all close together, but I wanted to experiment with a different vibe, and I also didn't want it to be too heavy since I was using a lot of glass beads on this one. But yeah, we're basically just adding a bunch of little red beads to different chunks of the wire. I would also recommend to tuck in the last bit of the wire into one of the beads so that you're not poking yourself when you're trying to wear this thing, or dull it with a nail file or a Dremel or whatever you got that can dull wires if you have any good tools for that. I found that it's easier to put the beads on the wire first before attaching them to the necklace. It just gives you more freedom of movement, but do what you like, obviously. And I personally really like the look of like smaller going to bigger, but you can do any combination of blood spatter pattern. If you look up blood pearl necklaces, you can find lots of different inspirations for different things that people have done in this genre. So if this specific style isn't speaking to you, but you want to make something similar, feel free to play around and do different designs with the red beads and all this kind of thing. Basically, making little wire lines of beads, and once they're ready, just wrapping them around the necklace, all concentrated in that one spot that has most of the blood on it. You can do as many lines of wires or as few as you like. I did a couple, maybe like 4 or 5. I didn't want it to get too tangly or too heavy, but I think it's a really effective final look. So if this is of interest to you, I think go for it. It just looks so cool.
So this has got to be one of the pieces I'm most proud of and most happy with. I know it's like quite a popular design, shall we say, and a lot of different people have done it, but I don't think that takes away from the beauty of it at all. I think it's still absolutely gorgeous, and I'm really, really excited to incorporate it into more fancy looks. I'm even toying with the idea of adding more bloody pearl kind of beads, like more chunky big ones, so we'll see in the future if it gets a couple more, but for now I'm quite happy with it. Yeah, just super, super pleased with the final result of this. And I can think of so many different scenarios to use this in. Like, it would be great for like a 1920s look, it would be great for like a 1950s glamour look, it would be great with like a ball gown, it would be great in like a kind of kinder horror look, vampire inspired stuff. It has so many different possible applications, and I'm just really, really excited to experiment with this. I've been wanting to make more blood-stained clothes as well, like taking white skirts and ripping them and staining them with fabric paint and stitching in all sorts of beads. But in the meantime, I figured I'd just start with some smaller projects, and this has just been like really whetting my appetite and getting me excited for all the future possibilities of like bigger projects. I think that's all of the blood stuff for now. So if you aren't interested in that, then we can move on to other things.
For this next project, I wanted to make some sort of barbed wire earrings, but we are going to be using jewelry wires, so please exercise a lot of caution. It can be very pokey, and I do not want anyone being injured, so make sure to dull it as you go. In this project, I didn't really consider the importance of dulling it until the very end, so I did it out of order, but please, if you want to make something like this and you're going to wear it and have it close to your body, I don't want anyone getting stabbed, so please proceed with caution. All right, so first we're cutting out a little length of wire and straightening it out as much as we can, and then we're twisting it into kind of a rod. There's a couple of different ways you could do this. I found doing it by hand was pretty annoying. The best way I found was sticking one end of it into an awl and then twisting it on the other end. I realize in retrospect it would have been even easier if I like stuck a pencil or something and used it as like a vise to turn it, but I just used my fingers and it worked out all right. This gives a really nice and even swirl barbed wire base. Now it's time to make the barbs. So you're going to take your wire and wrap it around 2 or 3 times and then cut it so that it has 2 little points on opposite sides. We would recommend to dull each wire as you go instead of doing it at the very end like me. In terms of dulling it, there's a couple different options. If you make jewelry, you might have a cup burr or a jewelry file or a knife sharpening stone or something that you can use, but if you're like me and you don't really use a ton of this stuff, I just grabbed like a crappy nail file and used that, and it works better than nothing, I'll say. Once all your barbs are on and they're all dulled down, you're ready to start shaping it. So for this project, I wanted to do kind of some wire hoop earrings, so I'm taking a hoop earring that I already like the size of and kind of using it as a guide. If you don't have a hoop earring, you could use a cup, a coaster, or a bottle, literally anything that's round. If you don't like the idea of a hoop, you could totally just do a straight line of barbed wire, though I wouldn't make this too long just so you don't like poke yourself in the bottom of the shoulder. I can just attach a little fish hook earring and a jump ring so they're ready to be worn as earrings. And after having tried them on, I realized the importance of dulling those wires, so I'm going ahead with this crappy little nail file and just going on each point and giving it a good file on all sides, on the top, the bottom. Just poke it to make sure that it's getting dull enough before you move on to the next one. It's a little tedious, but it's a safety risk, and if you're not going to do this, I would not recommend making this jewelry. Yeah, basically, if you don't feel like dulling wire, don't make barbed wire jewelry. But yeah, I think it's a really, really cool look, and as long as you are very careful, very safe, and you understand the risks, I think that it is a fun accessory. Might be better for like photos and videos and that kind of thing. If you don't want to do a hoop, you could also do like a heart shape, and if you don't want to do barbed wire, you can make like some pentagram earrings out of wire. That way you're not messing with like the sharp pointy bits potentially poking you. There's a lot of options with wire earrings, wire jewelry. I recommend you look online, get some inspiration, and have some fun.
So these are the barbed wire earrings. I think if I were to make them again, I would maybe actually go out of my way to buy thicker wire, because I just used the thickest one I had on hand, but it doesn't quite give enough the look of barbed wire that I want. I think they're really excellent for like more punk looks and stuff, but I don't know, I like want to recommend you make these, but also just like be really careful and like know thyself and don't mess with super pointy wires. Honestly, I'm like touching the ones that I dulled right now, and it doesn't feel very painful, but I just worry. I think these look really, really fantastic, but if you have ideas of how to make this with something less pointy than wire, or like something that's easier to dull or whatever, I would love to know. Regardless, this was super fun, and I think maybe if you make like doll jewelry or like stuffed animal jewelry or stuff like that, this is also a really good idea for those things, and yeah, for photo shoots. But be really cautious with barbed wire jewelry, though I do think it looks super freaking cool, and would make really cool little like heart-shaped ones as well, like heart-shaped barbed wire earrings. Very fun look. So this next project, I wanted to use up a bunch of my random scrap bits of chain and make a sort of spiderweb chain to hang off my pants kind of design. I've seen a couple of these online. People make them as necklaces, as pants cuffs, as harnesses, as leg garters, as whatever you want. So if a piece of spiderweb jewelry sounds of interest to you, I think this is a really, really cool accessory to try making. So I'm starting out by getting a bunch of pieces of chain and laying them out in a kind of asterisk sort of pattern. I'm using a little jump ring to put everything in the center, and I don't really know a super clear way to explain what you're supposed to do. I feel like it's kind of intuitive when you have it in front of you, but yeah, basically you're just trimming all these little pieces of chains that'll be the web pieces in between, and then you just want to attach them all around. I found that it was way easier to cut the chain and attach a jump ring and then go from there, which was not what I was doing the first time. You want the chain links to be longer and longer as you go out in the web, and you can have as many or as few webs as you want. You could do like just 2 or 3, you could do 5 or 10, it can be as large or as small, whatever is your personal preference and style. So what I mean by cutting the chain is you want to find the spot that your next web will be at and cut it there, then attach a jump ring in. That way you can fit a lot more lengths of chain on the jump ring. And to make sure that everything is lining up, I'm just putting them next to each other and trying to cut approximately the same length. It doesn't have to be super perfect because spider webs aren't perfect, but if it really, really matters to you that it's incredibly neat, you can count the chain links or use a ruler, whatever you would like to do. I'm also doing this with a really dainty chain, but if you don't like the look of dainty chain, you could do this with a really big, chunky, heavy one and have like a really intense look. It's really just up to personal style and preference. You don't have to use silver chain. You could use black or pink or whatever you want. Really, truly, these are just kind of ideas to get you started, and hopefully you can go in your own direction and make all of the exciting jewelry and accessories of your dreams. But yeah, I'm just going ahead and slowly cutting each piece of chain link as I go, attaching the web, and going to the next part. Again, if you like little fiddly things, I think this is a really fun project. I think the most annoying part of it is like having to pick up and reposition the chain all the time. So at one point I moved it to a belt on a mannequin. But if you don't have a mannequin, you can use a pillow, you can use the back of a chair, you can hang it off of a drawer handle, like literally whatever you have just to make it easier to figure out what you're doing, because working on it on the flat surface is also different than when it's gonna hang off of you, depending on like in which direction it's going and all that. So as you go, I would recommend picking up the chain and seeing kind of how it would lay, just to make sure you're going in the right direction. For the top clasps, I just have these little recycled bits of metal that I dug out of my drawer. I don't remember what they used to be on, but now they're gonna be chain attachments, and I'm just attaching 2 on each side, but you can add as many or as few as you want. You could have it wrap around your entire leg, but this one is just gonna hang off as like sort of a side belt thing. I'm kind of finagling as I go and figuring out where needs more webs, where needs to be tighter, where needs to be looser. And here you can see it's really helpful to have it on a mannequin because it gives you an idea of how it will actually hang and is easier to see which chains need lengthening or shortening or pulling in one direction or another. So I don't have a specific like step-by-step, this is exactly how you should do it. I think it's very individual and you'll have to kind of finagle it as you go. We're just kind of going bit by bit and making sure that everything is kind of being pulled the way that I would like. I really like the look of the droopiness at the bottom. You can leave a bunch of drippy chain bits at the bottom, but I worry that they might tangle a lot and stuff. So I just left one long length of chain and added a spider charm to it. I think this just gives an extra fun little detail. But yeah,
Nothing really to this one other than finagling around with the chain. It takes a long time, but I think it gives a really, really stunning result. And if you're nimble with your fingers and don't mind fiddling with little pieces of metal, I think this is a really, really fun project and a good way to spend an afternoon. So that's what it looks like. You can pretty much see it, but let me show you over an outfit as well.
So I am super, super pleased with the Spiderweb leg chain. My only one concern is I'm not super sure about how I want to store it, but I think it looks really, really cool, and I'll probably just like hang it on the wall or something just to minimize tangles as much as possible. It's cool because you can also like hook it onto a choker and wear it as like sort of a neck piece. You can attach it to a shoulder and wear it as like a shoulder piece. There's just infinite possibilities when you just have two little clips to clip onto and have a lot of chokers and collars and stuff with like D-rings and different attachment potentials. So yeah, really, really excited to incorporate this in different looks, whether it is on the leg as intended or on the chest or shoulder or other places. Yeah, Spiderweb accessories are just so much fun, and I'm curious to see how it'll hold up in public in terms of like actual durability and if it'll get snagged and if it'll get like really annoying and stuff. So depending on that, I might make a lot more pieces, or I might say this was the one and only and we will move along. But yeah, so pleased with how my little accessory bit turned out, and I just love the movement of it.
After the spiderweb belt thing, I was just really into the idea of making more spiderweb jewelry. So for this I wanted to do a choker, starting with some black ribbon and some purple lace, and I'm just pinning the lace and the ribbon together. This choker, I'm going to show you a different method of closing it shut. First, I'm just going ahead and sewing the lace and the ribbon together. Again, oh my god, I'm so sorry about the overexposure, but once it's all nice and secured, I can go ahead and attach these D-rings to both ends. This will make it so that I can put in a ribbon to close it of any color or size or style. I could close it with a string, a lock, whatever you have, but this just makes it easier for storage. It's got less of like the dangly ribbons to get tangled in the dangly spiderwebs. It's a good look. And if you just wanted a ribbon and lace choker, you could finish it here and not attach the spiderwebs if you don't want to. So first I'm folding the choker in half so I can get an idea of the center and putting a needle and thread through it so I can attach the first chain, just a long piece going straight down, and then I'm attaching a couple of more pieces of chain, also equal distance apart from each other, or as equal as I can get without properly measuring it, just kind of eyeballing it. But I am going ahead and I wanted a total of 5 sort of strands, because I think an uneven number of links will look good, but as usual, do whatever you like. Just sewing them all on with some black thread. Once all the main lines are on, it's time to make the little droopy web parts, so we're just going with these tiny little bits of chains, and as I showed before, we're cutting open the links, attaching a jump ring, and then putting that little loop in. I do find it's easy to count small numbers of chains to make sure that they're even, so I'm going ahead and doing that to make sure that everyone has more or less the same length for the little droopies. And I'm making them all even in this project, but if you wanted some asymmetry where some of the loops are way tighter together and some of them are way droopier or like whatever, feel free to experiment, draw out some designs, whatever makes sense to you, I think will look amazing. But yeah, just going ahead and adding as many of those web pieces as I like. It's a bit fiddly, but it's way easier than making the spiderweb chain belt. So perhaps if the spiderweb chain belt is exciting to you, but you want to start with something a little bit more easy to get a feel for it and see if you actually like making this kind of thing, then I would recommend something like this, just making it on a choker. This also would be a good belt design if you did it on a really long piece of ribbon or lace or denim or whatever instead. So feel free to, as usual, modify as you like. If you want to make this into a belt instead, if you want to make it into a bracelet instead, a set of earrings that have some spiderweb drippies, whatever you like, experiment, and it's pretty self-explanatory once you figure out the basic idea. So hopefully that made sense, and I can show you how it looks.
So this is the little spiderweb choker. It feels so delicate and elegant. I feel like you could definitely make it look a lot more hardcore if you used bigger, chunkier chains, or maybe added spikes to the front of it. Truly, as I've said, these are just a jumping off point. You can add whatever you want over top of the things, or like minimize it or add more or use less, add fabric paint, paint little skulls on, use buttons, safety pins if you make sure they're like glued shut, little beads that have letters on them. Experiment, do what you like. Hardware also looks really cool on this kind of stuff. Little crosses and bats and charms. Really, really pleased with the Spiderweb choker. I think the movement of it is a lot of fun. If you wanted to add even more detail, you could add like little pearls or gems or something extra detail-y to the bottom of like each of the drippy chain bits. And I think it won't get tangled too much because it doesn't have too many strands. The other thing that's exciting about it is that since you can tie whatever length of string you want around this, it's really easy to modify and use as a leg garter, as a belt attachment, as maybe even a shoulder piece. Let's see if it would fit. But yeah, you could totally wear it around your shoulder. Yeah, I just love things that you're able to really easily modify and wear as other pieces of jewelry. So yes, while these were all mostly intended to be worn as chokers, don't let that limit you. Yeah, I think the lavender purple is also just such a pretty color, and I want to incorporate it more into my wardrobe. So yeah.
Alright, so I had a bunch of leftover denim from when I made a little cat punk jacket for my cat last week, so I decided to make a choker out of some of the leftover fabric. So first I am just cutting out a nice thick strip of denim. This will be folded over on both sides, so I'm making it much thicker than I actually needed it to be. And for this, the inspiration was just those like word chokers that you see sometimes. This one I just wanted to say vampire. So I'm going ahead and attaching some ribbon on both ends so I can tie it shut. Again, you can use the D-rings if you prefer, but I'm saving my D-rings for other projects. Sewing down the edges of all of the sides so the ribbon is nice and sandwiched in. If you wanted the really raw, kind of fallen apart look, I think that would also look really cool and grungy, so feel free to leave the edges unhemmed if that is your preference. And then I wanted to go with like a really old-timey English font, so I went on dafont.com to look up some inspiration. I'm just using a fabric pencil and writing on the word vampire in this old-timey English font. Dafont is a fantastic resource if you're looking for different styles. There's loads of them out there. I didn't want to do a stencil, I just figured I'd freehand it, but if you want a really clean look, you can also make a stencil out of the font and letter and word that you would like. Then I'm going ahead with some acrylic paint mixed with some screen printing ink and a really thin paintbrush, and just going ahead painting in the word. Like I said, very old Englishy kind of font, and at one point I realized that the end of the word was way more spaced out than the beginning, so I had to fix it by adding some extra lines. As usual, just do what you gotta do to make things look good, and maybe notice that before you start painting if at all possible, but sometimes you'll be like me and you won't really notice until it's too late, and that's okay too. I think this collar looks absolutely amazing, and yeah, you can go real creative and pick all sorts of different words that you could put on your choker. I think it's a great fun look and super cute, so yes.
This is what the vampire choker looks like. I'm so freaking happy with this, and I'm really tempted to make like a bunch more. And though it's really simple, you could go as out of your way as you wanted to with this. You could add D-rings to it, you could add spikes, you could add chains, you could add, like I said, buttons or more fabric paint or little designs, whatever you want. World is your oyster with this kind of thing. I kept it super simple, but I absolutely adore it. I remember I was on Tumblr a while ago and I saw this person who had cross-stitched a choker and added like black ribbons around it, but the fabric was white and it said femme, and it had violets in it, I think. So I think cross-stitch would also be a really cool idea if you wanted to do the word choker, but maybe you don't like to paint, but you do like to cross-stitch or do some other kind of craft. Totally painting is not the only option you have. Also on Tumblr, sorry I keep mentioning it, there's this person who I follow called Born in Winter. I'll try to link it below. They introduced me to a new method of stenciling for people that don't like to stencil, which is using like alphabet stickers that you can get at the dollar stores or whatever, and you can use those as the stencil instead of having to like hand paint things. So if you don't want to stencil, you don't want to hand paint, you have a dollar store near you that sells letter stickers, that's totally an option that could be really fun, though you have less control over which fonts you have. There's tons of options with these kinds of things. Get creative, see what's available to you, and I implore you to explore and have fun with it.
And we're gonna end with a super easy one. For this I just wanted a beaded necklace with some different charms on it. I wanted it to be really comfy, so I'm using an elastic string to put everything on, and I'm using purple, black, and silver beads, but you can use whatever colors you want. You could use just one color, you could use rainbow, you could use all different beads of different shapes and sizes like I am, where I have like some stars and some flowers and some glass ones and some swirls and whatever in there. Basically just making sort of camp counselor friendship bracelet kind of style necklace. I did tie a lobster clasp on one end and just a big jump ring on the other end, so it's easy to fasten, and the elastic string makes it super comfy. I originally was making this to do like kind of a goth Willow from Buffy sort of situation for a lookbook. I don't know if I'll use it for that or if it's just for fun in general, but I think it would work really well. So then to add the charms, I'm just going with a jump ring and all these different little silver charms and attaching them equidistant apart. I have like a little bat, a little spider, a spiderweb, a knife, a cross, stuff like that, and I'm just attaching them all around. This is super easy. It's just a beaded necklace with some charms, but I think it's absolutely stunning. You could use little letter ones if you wanted. You could use pride colors if you wanted. You could just use your favorite colors, whatever beads, whatever you have. I think this is a really fun way to use up different beads and to give kind of like super fun, funky friendship bracelet as a necklace kind of look. And again, you could do this as an anklet, as a bracelet, whatever you like. The world is your oyster. Yeah, just some big old pony beads. I think it's super cute, and I'm excited to wear it with like kind of more casual outfits.
And last but not least, it's so cute, it's so fun. I love this little charm necklace. Like I said, it originally had the idea of being used as like a willow accessory, but again, makes a good bracelet, would make a good belt attachment if you wanted to, like, you know how sometimes people have like chains hanging off their belt? You could totally attach this with like the little clips it has, so it's like hanging off your pants. Yeah, super fun and easy project. I don't remember where I got all of these charms. Some of them I got from online, some of them I took off other older broken jewelry, some I've had for years, like literally since I was 12 I've had a little pack of these crosses. So yeah, truly just a mishmash of harvested different things, and I really like when jewelry has a bunch of just very eclectic pieces and very like found object kind of vibe, so that's what I was going for with this, and I think it looks really cute and fun, and yeah, super easy to make. So if you don't want to spend like a day making a project but you want to make it in like less than an hour, then maybe something like this is more your speed, and I endorse whatever you want to do and have the energy and time for. So yeah, that is all I have for you today. I hope that that video was fun or informative or helped inspire you to go forth and make your own things. I also wanted to mention, if you don't know how to sew, fabric glue is always an option in these kinds of projects that there's no shame in using, but also sewing is a worthwhile skill to learn, and I promise that you too can learn. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube, and I believe in you. Thank you again so much for watching this video today. I really hope that it was helpful or inspiring or helped give you some new ideas for things you want to do or try out. I believe in you. I hope whatever projects you make go excellent, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Thanks again for watching, and bye for now. See you!